Podcasters Roundtable. Let's hit record and then start again. That stays in the live video, but the audio only section, the only audio portion, we can redo
Perfect.
that. Caught it just in time. Blame it on Dave. Podcasters Roundtable, round 57. Why haven't you started a podcast? I think that's what it's called. We have a little bit different here today, right? We have new roundtablers, but they're not quite yet podcasters. And this may have happened to you, and you are now have gotten over it, or you're a podcaster, or you should relate just by the struggles that are required to start a podcast. And we can argue how hard it should or shouldn't be, whatever. Maybe we'll dive into that. But we're going to talk to two new guests, two new roundtablers, and find out why they've gotten close, but they're not quite there yet. And Daniel, Dave, and we're going to try to work through those things and get you past those hurdles. Dirty dish in the background if you're on the video. Look at it. We could just scoot this way. There we go. All right. So let's jump in. Let's meet the roundtable, starting on my far end here. Looking a little blue. Where are you coming from? Welcome to the roundtable, Charlie.
Hi, I'm coming from the UK,
Right.
from Wales. I don't know what's happened with this lighting. I do look like It's pretty much a summary of what the weather's like here. So pretty grey. Yeah.
There you go. Way to go with it. I like the theme. It's a little wet and dreary in the UK, but thanks so much. It is like 12:30 in the evening, or middle of the night now, and you join an elite group of roundtablers who have broken the midnight mark to be here on the roundtable. So I completely appreciate that. I'm having a couple audio issues. I literally just got off the doorstep. There's a big giant box here. It's got a Focusrite 2i4 in it. I'm dying to take this out of the box and plug it in, especially as I hear the pop. So if you're hearing some type of pop in the audio-only version, I apologize. It'll be fixed next time. Blame it on the iMac. No one blames on Apple. I'm blaming it on Apple. That's it. I'm doing it. Daniel, co-host. Welcome back, buddy.
Thank you very much. Are you ready to podcast? I am.
Daniel's a little fired up, but he started a community, so he's got to go a little. He's got to go that extra bit.
Thanks
for joining us. Yeah, what?
It's Is that required now that I have a community?
If you want me to pay you, I need enthusiasm. That's right. And co-hosting, always the big money maker here on the show, Dave Jackson. Welcome back.
Yes, good. I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to tie nicely with my keynote on Saturday.
Oh, how nice for you.
I was like, very good. I'll just do my prep right here. This is awesome. So glad to be here.
Yeah, I hacked your Gmail calendar, and that's how I get roundtable topics here. Actually, Charlie, you are the inspiration for this roundtable, so maybe we can get into that. And a great way to get on the roundtable is to send me a suggestion for a topic that you have that you think you might have some expertise or experience, not expertise, just experience in talking about. And Charlie did that, and so I was like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. And I'm always into trying something new. So you're not podcasters yet, but not required here on the roundtable. And even though we want to get every podcaster out there, but let's get another new roundtabler in here. If you can see this on video, he's in a very impressive looking set there. And Kelly, welcome to your first roundtable.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
And what am I seeing in the background? Describe it for the audio-only audience.
So I'm actually in the State Operations Center. It's the Emergency Operations Center in Sacramento, California. And behind me, I'm actually in the media room where we do interviews during a disaster. We live broadcast a lot of stuff out of here. We do these kind of things like Skype interviews or anything where the media would have a question. And behind me is really it looks like a lot of people call it like mission control or like NASA. So there's a bunch of monitors back there which shows you basically how many wildfires are burning in California and evacuations and whatnot. And then there's some people that are milling around in here that are staffing the operations center. We're not at full capacity. We're sort of in a low hum right now. But had there been a big disaster, we had more than a dozen or so major wildfires in California, this place would be full of people managing all kinds of aspects of the disaster.
Yeah, so you have the gear. So we'll find out where the podcast sits. And I think maybe you have your own personal interest in podcasting as well as professional, so we can dive into that. But yeah, let's start off a little bit, Charlie, since you did inspire this round. What made you think of this topic, and where are you in that sort of, I guess, struggle at this point to get a podcast started? If you bought the gear, you bought a domain, where are you at?
Well, I've pretty much bought everything. So I've got the domain, I've got the website, I've got the gear. It's easy buying the stuff.
Sure.
You know, and it's always the excuse. I'm waiting now for the ATR.
It's the fun part, buying the stuff.
It's also the biggest excuse. Now I'm waiting for this. Okay, I'll start the podcast next week when this comes. Then something else shiny appears. Oh well, I'll start the podcast when that arrives. And there's always something that's keeping me from starting. I know it's all a mental thing, and I just can't seem to get over this one step.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with talking. I used to be a tour guide and a coach for 20 years. But there's something strange, even about recording your voice and then throwing it out there and letting people, judge you and give you feedback. And
yeah, it does take a little guts, and we might be digging into Daniel's tagline there. The guts to what's the tagline, Daniel? The Audacity to Podcast.
One of them is giving you the guts and teaching you the tools.
There you go, right? And it does require a little bit of just putting yourself out there. And it looks like, Daniel, in the chat, Jeff Anderson maybe had some similar struggles that Charlie has already seen. He said he has the equipment, right? He got that down.
And Jeff also said that one of the things, though, that was preventing him from starting was not having an idea of what to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, where does that come into the stage? So, Dave, what was when you were starting, if you can remember back in the day, back that far, do you remember one particular challenge? Was there any fear of putting yourself out there? Probably not. I mean, you're a musician, right? So you get that.
Yeah, I was doing a newsletter already, so I was already creating content. It was just a matter of I want to take this content and put it into a different format. I think one of the things that hinders people as we wait for Ray to come back is I think some of us are trying to come up with something that has absolutely never been seen before. Like, I want to come up with something completely original. And when you think about that, that's almost impossible. And if you think about some of the shows that are popular now, they're not really that new. I mean, you usually take items that are, you take a little bit of this idea and this idea, and then you merge them together, and merge that with your experience and your background, and then you come up with something that's slightly new. I was thinking about that. If you think about the iPod. Right, the iPod revolutionized the music industry. This digital little music thing. Well, it really wasn't that different. I mean, we had digital files, but before that, you had, the Discman. Before that, you had the Walkman. So I don't think you have to come up with something completely never heard of before. Now, it's cool if you're the first. That's always awesome. That's a good way to be. And that either means two things: you're going to be really, really successful because nobody else is doing it, or B, you're going to create a podcast that somebody's already figured out that nobody listens to this topic.
So, Kelly, I saw you shake your head affirmatively when Charlie was saying putting yourself out there and sort of that feeling before you actually record something and push it out to the public. Does that resonate with you a little bit?
It does, and it's kind of weird. As much as I do like public stuff, I do media interviews, and I've been on like the Today Show and all these other things. It's a different thing to represent an agency or do your work than it is to put Kelly out there, like me coming. Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of weird. See, I have this like, I don't know, sort of shyness about it, where I'm like, I can speak on behalf of somebody else, and I can talk about other stuff that I know, but when it's me saying, it's almost like, does my opinion even matter? Because the podcast is, in a lot of ways, your own opinion. It's you giving information, and so it's kind of it's been a hesitancy for me. I'm like, does people really care about what I think personally? I mean, aren't they really listening for something else content or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of illogical, but it is that sort of weirdness of like getting. And then you talk about all of these gremlins and people that come out there and will attack you and send you nasty stuff. That's it's all factors into sort of like good excuses not to start it.
Yeah, and it'd be fun to dive into how much are just sort of excuses to put it off because it's hard and it takes time. Dave, you were shaking your head when you heard him talking about sort of people attacking you, or
I just knew that was going to come up. So I pulled up as we speak. Addie Saucedo does the Do It podcast, and her major fear was people are going to say negative things. She has 67 reviews. Every single one, 5 stars.
right?
Not a single negative review in the bunch. And she held off for months because she was just worried about kind of the same thing, that who's going to listen to me. And her show is about, it's called Do It. It's intentional transformation for personal freedom. And so I just jumped over to see that, and I know I've gotten some negative feedback, but it is so minuscule compared to the positive feedback that you get. Now, the funny thing is, ask me to name a negative one, and I got it right off the top of my tongue.
Yeah,
ask me to name a positive one. I'm like, I think somebody said I was entertaining once. I don't know.
Yeah, why is that? Why does the sort of the squeaky wheel? It hurts, right?
Yeah. It's even if it's deserved.
How do we deal with? I think we've approached this on this show. So for someone who is having that feeling, looks like we lost Charlie, so hopefully he'll be back. How do we deal with this? Like, how do we get past it? I think it's really what we're trying to deal with on this show. So let's conquer that one a little bit. And is it just a matter of just doing it, or what about when the haters come along?
Do you deal with a lot of haters?
I don't.
I don't either.
I feel like I have an anomaly when it comes to a YouTube channel. I don't get that many trolls, although and trolls sometimes are a good sign that you're doing something right because you're getting out there, right? Daniel, how do you get past, or what would you tell someone who has this sort of this fear of putting themselves out there?
Like you said, when you get hate, it means you're doing something right. You're doing something strong and something that is divisive in some way, and divisive is often good. And in fact, I think it was Dino, I can't remember his last name, the guy from Triber.
Right.
One of the things he talks about is do something controversial. Yes, it's okay to get some hate, but that means that you're sparking a nerve. People care. Dave, what is it that you say? Make your podcast so that people do what?
Well, basically, so they what? What are you looking for? I'm not
it
sure.
was like laugh, cry, groan.
Oh,
something.
laugh, cry, think, or moan. Yeah, impact, basically. So
Yeah.
I just reverse engineered everything I watched on TV, and it either made me laugh, cry, think, or groan. Now, there's also educate and entertain as well, but it's got to do something. But if I just spent 45 minutes and all I found was you hate sloppy joes, unless you said that in an entertaining, funny way, I'm going to kind of go, well, that's 45 minutes I can't get back. But all those people, I mean, think about the guy that's burning up the charts in the presidential race is Donald Trump, whether you know him or like him. I don't want to talk politics, but, man, that guy is controversial and says what he means and means what he says, and you either love him or hate him. And that doesn't mean so many people tried to be Howard Stern when podcasting first came out. They just cuss and swore and talked about fart jokes or whatever. There's more to Howard Stern than that. So it's not just being controversial, but you do have to stand for something. And if everybody loves you, or everybody, if you don't offend anybody, you're probably being so Melba toast or white toast or whatever they call that if you try to be everything to everybody, you're going to be nothing to everyone. Is that how that goes? Something like that.
You're bland.
Yeah.
Dino Dugan is from Trevor.
Yes.
Eileen Smith reminded us of that, and Roman Castro in the chat says the haters are not your audience. Keep doing what you do. Right. So I mean, what do you guys? So go ahead, Daniel.
One of the things, when you threw it to me, one of the other things I thought of is I feel like I'm kind of on the verge of getting a lot more hate because I've launched this new thing that does cost money, and at some point people are going to say, oh, Daniel's just in it for the money, or certain stuff like that. I know that's going to happen. I know I'm opening myself up for that, but my perspective is knowing that some hate is going to come in the coming months. My perspective is I know I'm doing something that's helpful, providing value, and sure, that will inspire some hate. That will mean some people won't like me. But I've already realized, I've already gone through all of this in my mind and decided I need to do this. So let the haters come. I think the people who will love the idea will come in larger droves.
Yeah, and Addie is actually in the chat, and she says, thanks for sharing. And she said, fear was getting the best of me. And I like the way she says it. It says, you have to punch that fear in the face. Just get it out there and don't think about perfection. So, I mean, does any of this help, Kelly or Charlie, when, I mean, it's probably not, it's not going to make you less nervous about putting yourself out there, but how about knowing it's, you may get some, I don't remember, it took a long time for me to get negative feedback, so you don't know.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like I've heard all of this and I still am stuck. I've heard the whole like, oh, you just got to go do it and you got to hit publish and it doesn't have to be perfect. But then I'm wrestling in my head like, well, but I really like that one jingle and the intro I heard on that one podcast, and who did that? And then I go down this rabbit hole of like figuring out what production people did it and what would mine sound like, and I get kind of stuck in this. I guess I'm back into the perfection thing, right? Like I kind of know what I like to hear and I'd like to sound like that, but then
Sure.
You've said to me before, is like you have to. Your first shows you're not going to like, and they're going to be painful, and but
it has to matter. You have to put it out there. You can't get better. You can't improve those things until you put it out there and you get better. But go, anyone here, thepodcasterstudio.com, episode 1. It's horrible. Horrible.
Ooh, that's brave.
It is brave. It's brave to leave it up there after you know how bad it is. But
another thing to think about. I was driving on the highway today. I'm driving in a place that I'm not familiar with, and I cut somebody off, didn't check my mirror, right? So I hear this, right? And I look around, and sure enough, he was waving at me, shall we say. That didn't stop me from driving home, though. Like, that was on the way to work. On the way home, I didn't go, well, somebody doesn't like the way I drive, so that's it, I'm done. It's like, here's a perfect stranger that doesn't like the way I drive. That's not going to stop me from driving, because I'm never going to see that guy again. And if somebody really hates your show, depending on the scenario, they're probably never going to listen to it again, or they're going to listen to it because they really love to hate your show. I have shows like that I'm like, oh, let's see how, I hate me, and I'm yelling at the dashboard, and I listen to it every week.
So there's another, I was just thinking about this as well, and that is, I do well in teaching, like in front of people, but the interaction that I get with them makes me feel like I really enjoy like when I teach live people, because then they can feed back to me and I can have a conversation with them and all that, and I feel like that's the best zone for me, and that's the best analogy of like that would be tantamount to a podcast, because I would be sharing stuff I know, helping other people. But with the podcast too, though, it's also, maybe it's a misperception of mine, but I'm like looking into the camera, or I'm talking into a microphone, and I'm sort of missing that other component of people feeding back to me.
What about this? What about this platform? I mean, why not do a Google Hangout that is, just to sort of have that interaction? You can have that audience and teach something, but you're recording it, and you capture that, and you can shape that into a show. So, this platform sort of does give you the ability to put yourself in that familiar environment, I think.
Yeah, I never really considered until I stumbled across you in this, that a Hangout would be a podcast. I'm having like that. It's a Hangout, it's not a podcast, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. You could be. This show is a Hangout on air, which is not, the video is not the podcast, because I put the audio only in a podcast feed. It's just literally that tech of putting it in an RSS feed, but the video still stays live on YouTube. It stays live on the website. So you kind of get I like being able to dabble in both worlds. It makes it easy for an audio podcaster to try live streaming, to try video as well. But yeah, you can turn that audio into a podcast, and that could help. That could really make it more dynamic for you to teach. But Charlie, so how, what's left in that hurdle of putting yourself out there? Do you think it's just something you just have to do, or is it an excuse? Is it just an excuse for something else?
Can you still hear me now?
I can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's still frozen up here. Well, there's also this, what's a sort of term that's trending at the moment called the imposter syndrome, where people have this feeling when they get out there that you're actually an imposter and you don't have all the skills. And this is something that I've been hearing a lot of recently, and it's something that's been on the back of my mind that's been slowing me down. I mean, now I've been busy with this podcast now for 3 years. I even wrote to Daniel 3 years ago suggesting a podcast to do with him. A lot. So it's been a long. If you look through your email, you might find Charles
I am
Moss
doing
there.
that right now.
A long time ago, and you know.
I can
So
bet
it's-
you. I as far as the imposter syndrome, I can guarantee that everybody, so Dave, Daniel, and I, we all felt that.
Oh yeah.
I certainly felt it. I think a lot of people. I think it's very common. So why am I starting a show about podcasting? Who am I? Dave's already out there. He's said it all. He knows it better than I do. How could I have, why? Who's going to listen to me? But, I just did it because, on one hand, it's just you're going to say it differently, and people are going to react to you different than they are the other person. And on a lot of levels, it's a journey. It's not only the journey for your audience, but your journey as well, and they're kind of going on that with you, right, Dave? So, I mean, you probably felt like that before you got into any one of your shows.
When I was doing the music marketing thing, there's a guy named Bob Baker. He is the godfather of music marketing. His book was in the School of Rock movie, and I was just like, oh, who can go up? This is stupid. I'm going up against Bob Baker. Everybody, and so I got to interview him, which was cool. There's one of the bonuses of that, and we're actually kind of friends. And I asked him, I'm like, well, how did you become such a marketing guru guy? And he goes, oh, it's easy. I just told everybody I was. He just went, ding, I'm a marketing guru, and started writing magazines and articles and this and that. And I was like, oh, that's how you do. You just go, there you go. And if you're not an expert, there are those people that's a cool podcast where you take the audience through the journey of you becoming the expert. So you don't have to be the expert. And
yeah, it sounds like it's another sort of buzz term, the fake it till you make it thing. What do you guys think about that? Is that something that you should do, or is it something you should embrace, or the beauty of podcasting is I think you can be transparent. You can say, hey, I don't know it all here, right?
Yeah, there was along that same lines I heard, I don't know, it was one of these guys, Brendan Burchard or somebody that said it smacked you in the head and said, who does the expert fairy come by and anoint you an expert in something, and just because you haven't been doing it for 30 years doesn't mean you don't have something to share and a perspective, so it's sort of like, I guess you're right. It's not like getting a PhD or you don't get certified in podcasting or whatever it is you're talking about. So it's kind of, that just sort of made sense. I'm like, oh, duh, yeah, I guess you're right.
Yeah, and being an expert is only one small sliver of how to conduct a show, right? Daniel, you're not an expert in everything you do a show about, are you?
I try to be, but
you're not.
I'm not. What my approach is, I present what I can. Sometimes it's not necessarily the same thing I can do, but it's what I've learned, what I've observed. So in a way, that does make me look like an expert. But how do you define expert? That's the thing. Is expert a matter of the skill or the active implementation of it, or is expert the wisdom, the understanding of it?
Yeah.
And I think the expert is more the understanding of it, not necessarily the implementation. Implementation demonstrates expertise.
And I think
That's
this might
how
just
it's presented.
I think this might just be a fear and maybe misconception of new podcasters thinking they need to be the expert, but you don't need to be an expert at all. That's just one small thing that you can do with a podcast. You say, well, I know a lot about this, and claim you're the expert, but maybe you're just hey, I just want to learn this with you. Let's go along for the ride, and we'll learn together. And through that, you become an expert. But being an expert may be no part of what you want out of a podcast. So, but I think going in, we feel like, man, we have to be the authority because we're behind the microphone, we're in front of the camera. Why are people going to listen to us? But that intimacy factor that podcast brings, I think people like it when you're not the expert. They listen to experts all the time, people who are held out as experts. But this makes it feel, I feel like Dave is just a podcaster like I am, and let's go through it together, right? And Masa Wells in the chat says, okay, I'm just plain scared. He says, after years of being a producer, researcher for others. He has the gear, the talent, and time, but I'm just plain scared to record a news/text/current events show. Geez, do I need a co-host? So could a co-host help with this?
I think so. Getting to lean on someone else's help, I think it helped me a big amount when I was struggling with my comedy podcast, which was the first show I launched for 2 years, only released 9 episodes. And when I decided to make the commitment to go weekly, around that same time, I realized my friend here would seemingly make a great co-host. We have this great dynamic, and I think it would be a lot easier if we can bounce things off of each other instead of putting the full responsibility on me. And almost 200 episodes later, it worked really well.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on. This is a deep one. This is obviously an important factor in getting started. Who knew this one was so deep? This is cool. Maybe we can do another round about this. So that's just the fear, just getting over that fear of putting yourself out there. And I'm not sure that we gave any. I'm not sure there is a solution.
Jump in,
but
well, I think there is, Ray. Actually, like,
good.
Thinking about it, the reason I've gotten to know you, and the reason I'm engaged even here, is because I think the only way I'm going to get kicked in the butt to do it is to have it sort of an accountability. So I've got inspiration by the folks that you've brought on your show, and this the Podcasters Roundtable, to know, like, oh, it works. These are normal people, and there's experts in the field. But I really need somebody to go, okay, Kelly, so when are you going to get that done? I mean, it sounds as sad as that sounds. I mean, I really need I need sort of like somebody else going, hey, let's go, come on, because it is an optional thing. This isn't like I'm getting paid to do it. This is I have a passion. I've wanted to do it, but I'm kind of in that stuck, like, well, does anybody really, I could think of some other things to do besides that. Right
Dare
now.
I say, hire a consultant, right? I mean, someone who's going to push you. Hey, like, you need to have your art ready. You need to get your RSS feed straight. You need to record this intro, outro, get it to me next, and then we're just going to put it out there. So having someone else, I mean, I think is a good point. Like, I think grab someone else who can help you get through that process and sort of hold you accountable, right? You don't have an audience. So once you're a podcaster, you become a little more accountable because you have an audience, right? So maybe that's why you show up every week on the weeks you don't want to, right? And I think, Dave, you've talked about that. But Kelly, let's shift a little bit, because you guys are interested in doing podcasting professionally, but also haven't started there either. So your personal podcast is a little easier for you to go out in an official capacity, but personally it's a little harder. Why hasn't your group there started a podcast? What's the barrier? I've seen the gear.
Yeah, well, it's like we have all the toys, that was one of the big excuses that we've had in the past, is like, well, we just don't have the right microphones, and well, the people that know how to do it have these Heil things, and we couldn't order those because you have to order them, and it's like all these reasons why we couldn't do it. And so now we have all the gear, we can do it, and we're not just, the gear's not just for podcasting. We do voiceovers and voice tracking for videos and documentaries and PSAs and all that kind of stuff. But for us, part of it was like the sort of, my team kind of looked at me and they're like, really, podcasting? Like, what the heck is that? Like, they really just didn't see that connection. I love podcasts. I listen to a lot of them. I've Pat Flynn and all these others I watched be very successful in it. It's building an audience. But my team is just sort of like, yeah, this is just another like weird fad thing that you're going through, or nobody's going to listen. Like, that's for a certain niche of people, and that's not our audience.
Right.
That's kind of what I've heard.
Yeah, so that's tricky. So Dave or Daniel or anyone else, bringing other people in a podcast, right? How do you get other, you want to do it, but what would you say to your boss or your company or another, maybe you're consulting with a company that says, podcasting's just it's a fad?
I tried to get my former company, my last job 5 years ago, I tried to get them to start a podcast. I was pushing and pushing and pushing, and what I finally ended up doing is just getting a couple other people together who I knew would be good on the podcast, and we recorded a test episode. And the company did overall like it, but they did want to control the message a lot more, and that just complicated things. And now they've got a podcast. Years after I left, now they have a podcast. But I think, when you're in a company, that can be really difficult because you need to convince people not that this is another marketing arm and it needs to be highly edited and such, but you need to convince them this is an opportunity to build loyalty and to connect further with our people and be able to share our content with people in ways that they might have never been able to consume the content otherwise.
And Sir Daniel, thank you for being an employee here, and this sounds like a great idea. How are we going to make any money with that? What's your response when someone comes to you and says, "Well, how am I going to make money with that podcast?" Is that the appropriate question?
It's strengthening the relationships. Think about it as you're keeping your customers, and there can be ways. We all talk about this, but there can be ways to use a podcast to build business. But the main thing is really strengthening relationships and deepening that connection with your customer base.
Right. And so, Kelly, what are some of the any other pushback you see from the organization in
well,
sort
I think
of diving?
and some of them are just, some of the staff members are like, well, it's not about me. Like, we provide public information during a crisis, and this is not. They sort of associate podcasting with some sort of personality-driven thing, like, I guess maybe sort of the same thing I was like. This is not about us. It's about the mission and what we're doing and all that. And
right. I'm not an entrepreneur.
I guess maybe that's what it is. They just sort of like, why would I want to become a radio personality kind of thing? Once they hear like, oh, it's a thing you listen to in the car on the way, and it's sort of like radio, and so I think they're stuck in this, like, they're basically using stereotypes, or frankly just don't know what they're talking about and discounting it. So I've been pushing. I'm like, we're going to do this. We need to put together one. I mean, really, the smart thing for us to do is just try it. And how ironic is, like, I'm giving them advice about something I won't do myself. But
there you go.
is that we just need to try it. We talk about multimodal learning. Some people love to listen. Some people like to read. Some people like to watch or see. And so, what part of the listening are we fulfilling in our mission here? And we're not. And so maybe this is an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and I think it still can be scary because now you're sort of putting yourself on the line. You're saying we need to do this thing, and then it comes back and it's like, well, how many listeners do you have, Kelly? It was like, well, I'm 3 months in and 100 people listen to every episode, and they go, what is going on? Total waste of time, right? Dave, what do you say to that?
Well, I would say to that number one, those are 100 people that chose to find that podcast and hit subscribe or click play or whatever that. It's easy to play a podcast, but it does take some effort. I would also say those are 100 people that may be talking about our brand to other people. That's the big thing. And especially if you can get your customer, your audience on your show to explain how they're using your product or how they're benefiting from your service, it's awesome because it's a commercial without sounding like this Sunday, it's not this hard sell kind of thing. One of my favorite, they don't do it anymore, but Evernote for a little while had a podcast, and they had the main developer, they had the CEO, and just some guy that loved podcasting put together an Evernote podcast, and they would explain, here's what's coming down the pike. They would explain if there were any kind of bug fixes or anything were going on. They were completely transparent, and then they would have people going, hey, here's what I just started doing with Evernote. It was like this awesome podcast, and to me, I always use that as a great example of a great way for companies to use a podcast. For me, I always wonder, from a work standpoint, a private podcast for salespeople, instead of having them come into the office for a meeting and then sending them back out in the field, all that time of coming into the office and going back out into the field, they could just be listening to it in their earbuds. There's all sorts of ways you can use it for work.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be challenged for sure to convince.
Why do you think they stopped doing the Evernote podcast? What do you think that was all about?
I have no idea. I found it, and I know the audio quality was horrendous. I mean, this was like 2008-ish, maybe a little later. I don't know, because I went to find it again because I actually started using Evernote. I'm like, oh, and there's plenty of Evernote podcasts. They're just not the one from the official company. So I would love to find out. That's a great question.
Right, and being able to do a lot more with a lot less, right? Being that power in the person who subscribes to a podcast is probably so much stronger than broadcasting out, hitting 1,000 people who are, whatever, disinterested. They may have been forced to see your content or whatever. Recently I heard that, you don't subscribe to a podcast by accident, right? And so you started using Evernote. You listen to this, right? It could be much more powerful, and I think it is. I think the power of podcasts, those small numbers are much different, and you have to get out of these sort of old ways of thinking, like, a TV show doesn't get 2 million views, it's canceled, right? But I mean, if we got 1% of that as a podcast, it could be highly successful. So it seems about changing the way people perceive old media versus this new media.
Yeah, I mean, I teach a lot of Microsoft stuff, but I use Evernote mainly because I heard how other people were using it on that podcast, and I was like, and that's when I loaded it and started playing with it. So that wasn't, it's always the long tail. It's not going to be, well, we started a podcast for a company, and the next month our sales went up, 800%. I've heard people say sales went up 20%. There was a knitting show that they sat on their front porch and knitted and talked. It was just like you were sitting next to them while they're knitted, and they had a website for knitting products, and every time they said, yeah, today we're using the blah, 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 whatever, they said they would see where there would be a spike in sales of that item.
My favorite example is, did you not talk about recently on your show, schoolofpodcasting.com, Gary Vee talking about something, how people, you don't walk into a party and then, like, wasn't there something about that? The whole concept of it's going to take time, he
did Wine Library, his podcast, for 18 months daily, and he said, and nobody was watching.
Right.
But he took his when it finally took off, his sales went, I believe, from it was something like 5 million to something ridiculous like 50 million or 30. It was just through the roof.
It was something it's something like, you don't walk into a party and immediately say, like, you're my friend or something. Relationships take time, basically. And so
I got a question, right?
Yep.
So how long would Gary have gone with no viewers? Like 18 months or whatever. I'm trying to think to myself, God, how long would I go with nobody listening to it, where I'd be like,
nobody's a relative number.
I'm just going to sing in the shower or something.
I think he was seeing it grow over time, and he saw the enthusiasm amongst a really small amount of people. But how long do you, especially as an organization, how long do you invest in this thing if it's got 100 and then 6 months later it's got 150, 200? Does any growth justify it, and can you pass that on, right? Or when do you say, this isn't working? This isn't working.
Yeah, is there, I guess reversing the thing is so give me a good reason not to do it. I mean, other than sort of because you just have a big ego or something. But what? I mean,
We've done that round, I believe.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think so.
I haven't seen that one.
Why not to start a podcast? I think we did. Who knows if we covered that. But Daniel, you have any feedback about that?
Yeah. Well, Gary Vee, how big really is no one? I think a lot of us would love to have the no one that was listening to his show.
Right.
So his numbers are relative, but I think that in everything, like business or podcasting, in anything that you're trying to build, there is this breakthrough point that you come upon that seems to be, depending on the speed of the industry you're in, seems to be around 3 to 5 years or so. Or since podcasting, I think, is a much faster moving industry, I think that breakthrough point is more like a year or 2 years. But it's really at that point that then you either you find your voice, you find a new audience, you break through and really start to accomplish something. And like for me in my business, I've been doing this now, helping podcasters. I've been doing this full time for just over 4 years. And it's only in the last year I felt like I'm on the edge of a breakthrough. Finally, after 3 years of work, a year later, bringing me to now, I finally feel like I'm finally breaking through after 4 years of hard work. So I think the main thing is you keep at it and you look for that breakthrough opportunity.
Yeah, I'm listening to a book right now by a guy named Mark Schaefer called The Content Code, and he said, we don't really have a shortage of good content. There's plenty of good content out there, and there's not a shortage of content, period, because, man, there's a lot of noise out there. He goes, but what makes good content a lot of times is insight. And I went, man, that was when I was like, all right, that's a clamor, that's something, I don't know. And I think that's a lot of times what a podcast can help, because now I have an open communication with my audience, and to me, the really good podcasters are the ones that not only talk, but they listen. And so when you get that insight from your audience, that's when you can turn around and deliver that content that gets them talking about your podcast, your service, whatever it is.
Hey, I have a question about this. So is there sort of a logical, maybe this is the wrong way to think about it, but to say like, okay, so I have the passion, I want to do it, I think I know what I'm talking about, at least in an arena that I want to do this podcast in. Should I just set a goal and say like, all right, let me just get off my butt and do this. I'll do 7 episodes or 5 episodes, and if by that 5th episode I don't have more than 10 listeners, I should either retool or abandon ship. I mean, is there any sort of, do you guys give advice like that? Like there's a goalpost you should try to mark to as sort of your maiden voyage?
The first place I always start off with, don't check your stats, and go back to the original question, why do you want a podcast? Define that goal, because if your goal is, well, I'd like to make $100,000 in 12 months, I'm just going to say, put your PR40 on eBay and just, not that you can't make $100,000 in a month, it's just not the norm. So I would start with why, because if your goal is to help people understand something or to educate them or inspire or entertain, and in 6 months you're entertaining 22 people, you're successful. You're entertaining people. You said that's why you want to get, maybe why you want to get into it. So is the number a deciding factor? Because it's hard to say for me if it's, the more niche you go, if it's the, Frisbee football in, Brazil league, that's a super niche function that you're not going to get 1,000 listeners, but you might get 60 people who really, really, oh my gosh, Frisbee football in Brazil, I love this. So it's, do you guys have any kind of numbers that you spit out for people?
More than one.
Yeah.
More than one that you don't call mom.
Yeah. It's really about which industry are you in and what are you trying to accomplish. But the truth is, any number that is more than someone you know, or if you receive an email from someone you've never met before, that's a sign that you're making a difference.
Here's an article that I'm quoted in came out today, and there was a lot of great other podcasters with some good tips, and I'll put the link in the show notes, which you can find at podcastersroundtable.com/5757. And this one is from, maybe it's Annie or Ani Alexander, or maybe Right to Be Read podcast. Anyways, she says, let's see, I wish someone told me the download statistics mean much less than many of us believe, and one should not get obsessed with it and use as a success indicator. What is a success indicator instead is the loyalty and engagement of those who listen. Wait until you get that first email back from someone you don't know, right? And who says, Ray, I listen to the show. Kelly, I listen to your show. I totally think of you're changing things here. I mean, those emails, they'll come periodically. It takes a long time sometimes, but they'll boost you. And then you see that 10 number then really becomes one person that you don't know that you've reached. It's huge. So we all look at the stats. You want to see, I'm putting this out there, is it working? I mean, in the beginning, it's like, is it working? Is someone, we probably in the early days, I sat there with the refresh button. Oh, hey, 2, 4. A week later, I'm like, 15 is a new record. And it's awesome. And so, if you're doing it just to see if it's working, and I think in the beginning it's enough. You'll have numbers. It'll happen.
Yeah.
And these days it's easier to get those numbers if you've probably already plugged into some community that is involved in the topic you're interested in, or people who have that interest, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And again, finding that one person who is not related to you, who then is benefiting from your show, will be huge. But yeah, I definitely don't get wrapped up in the stats. I wouldn't use it as an indicator of how you're doing and should I sort of cut bait.
I think something else you shouldn't get wrapped up in, and if Paul Culligan was here, he would be hammering this down. And so, Paul, this one's for you, is don't get wrapped up in the tech. I really like the way Paul Culligan from the Podcast Report puts this, is he says, when we make podcasting about the tech, we're missing the point. It's really about the message. I think that podcast consultants like Dave, Ray, and myself We help you with the tech so you don't have to focus on it so much. But really, what we want you to focus on, and we'd love to help you with, is, as Dave puts it, massage your message. Because that's the most important part. Spend your time focusing on and planning what you're going to say, what your podcast is about, the why. But I think there's also this personality difference. I think most of us are planners to some degree, and like we say stuff like pick what your first episode is about, or I like to say outline, know what your first 7 episodes are going to be about, this kind of stuff. But there will be those people who won't truly know whether they like it until they actually get into it. It's like, how are you going to know if you're going to like that pie? Well, you can look at it, you can smell it, you can ask other people, but you really won't know whether you like it until you actually take a bite.
I gotta have you around at dinner time when my daughter doesn't want to try something. I'm like, tell a 4-year-old, how do you know? There are cartoons that help with that, by the way. But,
3 bites. You gotta take 3 bites.
Yeah, gotta take 3 bites. You gotta try it. You want ice cream? You gotta try it.
That's it.
So, Charlie, what else? What else is holding you back? I mean, we are.
Well, also the thought of having to do all this social media, because if you're going to succeed,
don't do it.
It really seems to involve a lot of promoting your actual work. And I'm not a great social media person. I don't like to put myself out there. But to actually make that podcast work, I think I have to do it. So this is like quite a, yeah.
I would say you don't. I mean, what do you guys say to that? I'd say you don't. I would say focus on the content and don't worry about. I've talked a lot about how you start a show and that's just one small piece, and marketing can actually consume 5 times the amount of time it takes to produce that show. But it could be enough marketing just to make really cool content that's in iTunes that people are finding, right, you guys?
I can go either way on this.
You got a tweet?
I think. It again goes back to the why are you getting into podcasting, but if you're really trying to grow your audience, you've got to make that great content. Yes, that will be found, but the whole if I just put it out, they'll find it. You got to go find them, make friends, and say, oh, by the way, I have a podcast. So
I would say, too, that it's stopping you. So in that case, don't
do it. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't have to, by all means. And there are all sorts of tools. I think I was just hearing today on the WordPress engineer helped me. Dustin show. He was talking about Jetpack and how Jetpack has a bunch of stuff that'll automatically just tweet it and LinkedIn it and whatever else it So you could have those automatically done for you just based on your post. So yeah, you don't have to. It's one of those things that. If you make a pie, it's pie night here at Podcasters Roundtable. You want somebody to eat it. You're like, look, man, this is real apple and cinnamon and stuff. Here, this is gonna, eat some pie. So they usually want to go out and tell people. But the good news is when they find it, if you made the right pie, they're gonna go tell people. But you got to get that first person to bite it.
Yeah, I'm looking through the chat here to see if a lot of this is resonating with others. So they've either been there or they are there, right? So, any other barriers, Kelly?
I'm just wondering, from you guys, your experiences, is there an end game? I understand it's about, you really want to have that interaction, and you want to have meaningful content and all that. But for you guys, is there an end game where you would say, geez, I would hope in 3 more years I have 7 podcasts, 2 co-hosts, and something? I mean, do you have is there a goal line that goes beyond where you're at now?
Anybody?
I'd like to turn this into an enterprise or something. I don't know.
For me, as long as it's fun, I'm in. I mean, that's to me, that's how I've killed most of my other podcasts. I'll do it because my life has changed, my passions have changed, and I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like talking about this anymore, and I'll say thanks for listening, see you bye, and nobody has planted any bombs on my door or anything like that. I've had people say I really wish you wouldn't have killed that one. I wish you would have killed this other one because I hate that one, or but joking. But to me, it's like saying, well, Dave, don't you want to do podcasting for a living? I think that would be cool. Rob should hire me today at Libsyn, doggone it, or whoever. I would jump at that. But on the other hand, I'm lucky enough to where I like my day job, so it's not like I'm slinging mud or something or whatever. Not that slinging mud is bad if you're a mudslinger, but
This show has an end game.
What is it?
Once I get every podcaster on the round table, we're shutting it down. Now, that's stupid, right? It's like, but I think there's this thing in like Zen Buddhism or something that like nirvana is this place that you actually can't reach, but it doesn't mean you don't keep trying. So for me, it's about the community. This is a community I just have fun in. I'm geeking out with my friends here, so for me, and oftentimes it's whatever cool stuff comes of that you can't plan for. I did not think when I started a podcast that I would be a professional podcast producer hired by an organization to produce their network of shows for the last 7 years, having a total dream job. I did it because I wanted to try podcasting, and what came of it was the most life-changing thing that's ever happened to me. So sometimes the end game is to just, like Dave, like have fun. You have to enjoy doing it. And it really depends on what you're doing it for. You might have a goal. I mean, for our podcast at work, it really is just to help inform the public about the science of microbiology, and that's it. There's no end game. I mean, it's just to keep. It's a public outreach thing. It's something we do as a communications arm to sort of engage the public, and it's just another thing. And if we are doing that, and you almost certainly are going to do that if you're putting out good stuff, then we're successful. And so I don't think oftentimes a lot of podcasters get in with an end in mind. I don't know. I mean, yes, there have been this last year has seen the rise of the entrepreneur podcast, and a lot of people do get in to make money. That's a common goal. But, Daniel, what do you think about Kelly's question about the whole end game of your show or a show?
It's like Dave said, the end game is when I decide I've said enough. I don't have anything else to add. I've accomplished goals, but for me, it's a progressively created set of goals that, like several years ago, I never imagined I would be launching and doing what I was doing today. When I launched my business, I thought I would be a web designer and that my podcast would support web design. Well, now I am no longer designing stuff for people, and I'm actually thinking of shutting down a business, an aspect of my business, completely rebranding my business, like filing new legal paperwork and stuff to get away from that whole design idea, but also recognizing that in the future, there might be a point where I decide, okay, I've said everything in podcasting, I've put out enough information, now it's time to move on to the next big thing.
And even then, we're not likely to kill our baby. Right. It is very hard, we've talked on this show, to then actually end. I have never officially ended my first podcast. I just left it hanging. It was not a good way to go. But, it might come back someday. It might happen, you guys. It's going to happen. Charlie, this is a great question for you because you haven't started. Do you have an end goal in sight? You want to start the show. Why? But do you have that end goal in sight? Or no idea?
Well, I haven't sort of tried to think too far in the future, but the idea of starting the podcast about WordPress for WordPress users, there's so many podcasts out there that is just for developers and things like that, and there's not very much going on the podcasts for just the general users. So my plan has always been to start that, and of course the idea would be that in time you'd find sponsors and I would start my own little business, and that's sort
a
of
common
end
end game. That's a common.
Yeah,
I think a lot of podcasters get in thinking, maybe I'll find a sponsor. That would be cool.
Yeah, so that's the idea, basically.
Dave raised his hand. He's still looking for a sponsor.
Well,
I think I almost wonder if like the end game too is like if I sort of look at what I like is it seems like it'd be fun to do. I've got a lot of great ideas and stuff that I want to do, but I'm also very sort of intoxicated by this idea that at some point you can cut ties with, you could potentially cut ties with having, the man above you telling you what to do, so it'd be like, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could do podcasting, when and retire out of having to be subservient to, somebody that that tells you what to do every day. I mean, that's maybe another. To me, that'd be like, that'd be kind of cool. I could do that if I could go teach all the time, or if I could do podcasting all the time and teach through that. I'd do it if I knew.
It's a nice
I
thing
had
to think about, but you can't have that in-game drive the podcast because.
Well, on the other hand, if you don't try it, I mean, I remember when I started Healing Our Marriage with my wife, I'm like, this will be cool, and we're going to do this, and it's going to do this, and people will talk about how open we were on the show, and we'll be on TV. I had delusions of grandeur when I started my customer service show. I pictured being a consultant for customer service. None of that happened. But you know what I can say? That didn't work. You know what? Healing Our Marriage almost killed my marriage because we were podcasting together. We couldn't, because I was forcing my wife to do something she didn't want to do. You know, the customer service show was just Dave being grumpy. I went to Longhorn and the waitress was awful. Okay, that's not entertaining.
Is that still online? Because I'd like to hear it.
I could get it for you. Yeah.
InternetArchive.org.
That sounds like it'd be good.
Yeah, but those are two things that I was like, I don't know, let's find out. I mean, Mark Johansson said in the chat room, how are you going to know if you like something if you don't try it?
Yeah.
So,
And Charlie, I don't know if we stepped on you there at the end, but anything else there?
no, well, I mean, I've been now so long.
Nope.
And there
he goes. Charlie's having a few connection issues, but well, we're gonna wrap it up. And the audience has been awesome to hang with us for an hour. And make sure the recorder's still going. The recorder's going, although we've got some audio issues that I'm going to have to deal with, so that's the fun of podcasting, especially when you are a bit perfectionist in your production styles. But Charlie's back in as I sort of try to make some time there. But Charlie...
It keeps falling out the internet.
Yeah. Go ahead and finish up what you were going to say there.
So I've really sort of put everything into it now. So I've even literally I sold my business in South Africa, and I've moved to the UK, but I spent a year in India trying to get my head straight so I would be ready for this new adventure. So, and actually now, coming on this show here now, which I'm extremely nervous about, and I never thought I would be so nervous, is actually now made me feel a lot more comfortable about going forwards and doing the actual podcast. So this is what I was hoping would be a bit of a kick up the butt. So
nice.
Now I can listen to myself and get over and judge myself and go, oh my God, did I sound like that? Did I say that? You know, and then
I've tripped on my own tongue at least 4 times already today. So it doesn't, that's just a lie. That's whatever it is. We're not professionals, right? We're sharing something. We're sharing our journey. We're not necessarily trained in this. So, and people can connect with that and they can relate to it and they get it. So that's awesome. This show has been an incredible sort of tie-in to that, is that so many things have happened with this show that I didn't expect. I wanted to meet with my buddies and geek out over podcasting, but people are meeting in the chat. They're going off. They're starting new shows. Dave, he'll find a great interviewee for the School of Podcasting. He'll bring Kelly on the show and they'll talk for an hour about something we didn't cover on here, and it's amazing. So the connections that just by creating the space, creating the place for people to gather around that topic, and you're just sort of providing the opportunity. You don't even have to be the expert or the leader. It's just like, I'm just going to open this door and let's see what happens. So I hope that happens. Maybe, with you two guys, we're going to maybe give you a swift kick in the behind and make the roundtable check up on you and say, have you started, right? Because maybe that's what you need. But I'm glad that hopefully this is like a breakthrough. That would be cool. So we expect, you went to India and you came back, and you've got the makings of Steve Jobs. I mean, you could be the next. You're ready, man. You're ready. So, I don't know. Steve Jobs.
I just need to get the jumper.
There you go. Well, the outfit comes later. Right? Awesome. Well, again, so Charlie, let us know where we can find your future podcast, or just find you online if someone wants to help actually give you that encouragement as well, because I think you'll find this community does that. Go out and get a hold of Charlie.
So the name of the podcast is WP Egg. So it's wpegg.com. It's still got the coming soon. So you can email me at charlie@wpegg.com.
Do it. Email Charlie and tell him you want to hear that show. I can tell you that probably like 90%. Yeah, 90% of the people in here are WordPress users, so they need it.
Yeah,
they want it.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thanks for sacrificing sleep and staying up and joining that elite midnight club.
If I don't get it started in 2 weeks, could everybody email me just with verbal abuse, and then hopefully
and you get used to you'll get used to the abuse. Perfect. We'll give you that tough skin right before you even publish episode 1. I love it. Well, thanks again for your first roundtable. I really appreciate it. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for putting this on. And Ray and I launched our podcast about podcasting at the same time. And I remember my first thought when I saw Ray's show was, oh, really?
I thought that same thing. I was like, dude, seriously? Who is this guy?
That space is already so saturated with the 2 other podcasts about podcasting when I launched my show. And here's another one, really? But don't let something like that kill your enthusiasm. Focus on what you want to share. And you know what? The world probably wants to hear that too. So don't deprive the world of getting to enjoy hearing from you. I'm Daniel J. Lewis from theaudacitytopodcast.com.
Awesome. And Mr. Dave Jackson, thanks again.
Thanks. This has been a lot of fun, a lot of great insight. And for me, I want to ask the question, what's the worst that could happen? I have a total gym that I spent $300 on. I've got the 10-minute workout. I've got the stretchy little... I got so much exercise equipment that I do not use, but nobody said, oh, I don't feel like I kind of feel like a failure because I'm not losing any weight, but I mean, we all spend money on stuff from time to time that ends up going in the closet, but at least now I know, I don't like lifting weights.
And you even have a show about it, Dave.
Yes, that's true, and I'm inspiring people with my lack of success. So there you go.
And people are loving that show. So
yeah, so there you go. So jump in the water, and if you want some help, schoolofpodcasting.com.
Awesome. And Kelly, thanks for joining us from your awesome set there. If you're listening to the audio-only version, you should check it out. Check out podcastersroundtable.com and see Kelly's killer setup and tell him, hey, start that podcast. But thanks for joining us for your first roundtable. And when you guys are podcasters, we'll get you back on. And this is a great topic. We could go much more in depth. So there's meat on that bone left. So thanks again for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. It was great.
So do you have a website that we can go to give you this?
I don't think I really want to tell anybody now that I just revealed my soul that I have insecurities and I need to probably be on some medication for that.
Yeah.
But, I have procommunicator.com is my website and at Procom Kelly is where I'm at on Twitter. But the majority of what I teach is all crisis communication. Like, how do you message to people that are in a crisis, and what's the psychology behind it? And we see public officials doing press conferences and whatnot, and you wonder, like, what are they thinking? I'm hopefully going to get to most of them, and that at least in California, and try to teach them, like, there is actually a strategy to communicating to people during a crisis that makes it helpful for them, and it's not just some political message.
Yeah, do that, because I think you'll be leading in that space. So you definitely go ahead and be first or be early. So that would be really cool. It's still early to start a podcast. We're babies. We're 10 years old. So we can't drive yet, as they say. So can't drink, can't do anything fun except podcasts. So start your podcast. Go out to podcastersroundtable.com. Sign up if you want to join this roundtable. If you have an idea, podcastersroundtable.com/guests will put you in the sort of email list, which will then say, hey, submit. Tell us what you want to talk about. And we'll get you on here. Every podcaster in the world that ever exists and exists in the future will be on Podcasters Roundtable. I can't wait. That's a lot of T-shirts to hand out, but Nick, you're never getting yours. So inside jokes. I will see you next time. Podcasters Roundtable 58 in a couple of weeks. So looking forward to that. International Podcast Day coming up. You may see our faces pop up for that one. I just got my official uniform, which is a T-shirt. It's beautiful. So, all right. We will see you next time. Wave goodbye, everybody. Adios.
Adios.